Okay, welcome to Power Pivots, the podcast where we explore the fundamental career shifts and changes that have made all the difference. I'm your host, I go by Hatu, and today we are joined by
Funmi Dosunmu.
Funmi. How are you?
I'm doing well, Hatu. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad that we were able to finally get this on the post.
Me too.
Good. Well, you have a very exciting story. I have obviously been watching the story from afar, and I've seen a lot of your content where you've talked about your story. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to share this with the listeners today.
Me too. I'm very excited.
Okay, cool. So for anybody who's been here before, you know we jump straight into it. The PowerPoints are 3 words or phrases that encapsulate who you are. So Funmi, that being said, what would you say are your PowerPoints?
I would say my PowerPoints would be disciplined, consistent, and patient.
Okay. Disciplined, consistent, and patient. I feel like those are all very, very intertwined and related. Tell me why you decided to use those 3 words.
So I think throughout my journey, these are the words that I have come back to, like people have mentioned about me and my personality traits, and I think the words that have kind of paved the way for my success. I chose those words because I think those are the ones that people often struggle with, right? It's kind of hard to force yourself to be disciplined and consistent, especially when nothing is riding on it. It's not like I'm getting a paycheck necessarily, or people are waiting for these decisions. This is all like just self-motivation. So that's kind of why I chose those words. And patience, that's something I'm still working on. You know, it's hard to be patient, but after doing what I'm doing for about 3 years now, you know, patience does pay off. It's just not easy to wait, you know.
Yep, exactly. Awesome. And I'm sure that we're going to see exactly why you picked those words throughout your story here, which we're going to get into. They always say that the story is told in hindsight, and hindsight is 2020. So looking back, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now.
Okay, well, my journey definitely wasn't linear. It was a bit of a tangle in my 20s. So right after I graduated college, I did land a job as a healthcare analyst. That didn't last very long. It lasted about 3 months, and then I was laid off due to lack of work. And there started a whole bunch of random jobs and side quests up until I got turned 27. So in 2014, I joined an operations management team where I was working in a warehouse, and you know, it really just wasn't what I envisioned. I really thought I was going to be in a corporate office wearing like a cute little skirt suit and like walking around with my heels, but I was wearing steel-toed boots and jeans in a warehouse. So I was like, what am I doing? Like, is this really what I want to do with my career path? I wasn't really passionate about working in a receiving department and checking supplies. Like, that was not what I was passionate about. But honestly, I didn't really know what I was passionate about at that time except weddings. I was in love with weddings. Platinum weddings was big on TLC back in those days, and I was like, I really want to be a wedding planner. So I had the opportunity to go to school in Chicago for a master's program that I didn't end up finishing. But during my academic break, I decided to try and do a wedding planning internship with all my free time. And after a little bit of hustle, I landed a cool opportunity with a top wedding planner in Chicago who kind of like taught me everything that I knew about the wedding planning industry. So that was actually my first like major pivot out of like the corporate world into more of the service industry. And I think I did have to learn some patience there because it was quite tedious work. You know, when you're doing wedding planning, there's a lot of logistics and a lot of details you need to be abreast of, and a lot of like just annoying things. Like some of the things we had to do is open every rose petal, like open each flower rose for like a wedding so that it looks like it just bloomed. So a lot of tediousness, but I think that opportunity really taught me a lot and kind of paved the way for what I'm doing today. So after I interned and worked for the wedding planner for about a year or so, I decided to come back to New York, New Jersey, where my roots are, where my network is, and see if I can start my own wedding planning business by relying on my network. And that's how my company FMD Events launched back in 2017. And it was actually one of my first clients was someone I went to high school with. You know, she gave me a chance and she gave me her wedding to do. And it was just up from there. I hustled a lot. I entered into a lot of like bridal shows. I did a lot of networking with bridal vendors, wedding vendors, to just try to get my name out there. And I started an Instagram page, and that really helped in publicizing my services. And after a couple years, I had a thriving wedding planning business. So that was really exciting. I did that up until 2021. Luckily, you know, or unluckily, COVID hit around that same time where I was like, okay, I think I need to, you know, do something else. Like, wedding planning was great. Of course, it's beautiful to see people get married every weekend, but on the other side of things is that it's a lot of work. It wasn't necessarily bringing in as much money as I wanted it to. So it wasn't necessarily becoming something that was going to be sustainable for me long term. And I was missing some human interaction with others, right? I was a solo business. I was working for myself. I was working alone. So I was missing colleagues and just going to work. I was missing that 9-to-5 grind. And I started to think about, okay, I have all these skills. I know how to sell. You know, a wedding is basically like a big project, and I'm managing multiple weddings. I'm managing multiple projects. What are some careers that I could use these transferable skills in? And I always had an eye out on the executive assistant role, from like Mad Men days and like Suits, and seeing how the secretaries, you know, would act and what they would be doing for their executives. I was like, you know what, I know I could do that. I'm basically managing, you know, the lives of these brides and grooms. How much more different could it be to manage the life of an executive? So I decided to go for my second pivot, if you will. And after a lot of studying about the EA role online, doing a lot of research on Reddit, on Facebook groups and stuff like that, I was able to kind of finesse my resume in a way to make myself stand out. I was very particular. I only wanted to target smaller businesses, specifically like Series A, Series B tech startups, because at that time, my thought process was, okay, these companies are smaller. They probably are looking for people who are going to hit the ground running, who want to hustle and like put on all different types of hats, because it's a startup culture. They just need people to do the work. And if I can show them that I can do this, I'm in. So I used a platform called WellFound. At that time, it was AngelList. I reconnected with the head of HR at a small company, a health tech startup, and I came in as their first executive assistant / office manager to the CEO and the president, who both had never had an executive assistant before. So it was really up to me to kind of show them how to best utilize me. And it was really up to me to prove that I was proactive and I was the right choice for them. And I think I did that. So since about 2019, I was in the EA role, and I officially stopped my wedding planning in 2021. So there was some overlap when I was doing both at the same time. But luckily, I was able to wrap it up right before COVID hit, because that's when like the whole wedding industry went down anyway. So yeah. And so then since 2019, I've been an executive assistant. I've supported various different tech companies of different sizes and stages. And that is where I am to this day. I still work as an executive assistant, and I love it. And I love it so much that I decided to start a executive assistant career coaching brand called SixFigureEA, where I teach and mentor executive assistants. I show them that it is possible for us to get 6 figures in this role. And I give a lot of career advice for those who are looking to interview and change roles.
Awesome.
That's how we got
Awesome.
here today.
Very good, very good. I have a lot of questions to ask, obviously, as you can imagine, based on what you said. But first and foremost, I'd be remiss if I did not say TV has had a lot of influence on your career, because you brought up Suits and you brought up the bridal planning shows of like how you decided of interest in these roles. So I always just thought that was funny. But no, I kid. But let's talk about it. Okay, so you come from the very beginning, right? Obviously, you're doing something that you're not passionate about, and it's not what you envisioned. And you really decide that at this point that you're going to use your free time to pursue passion. And I think that's like very interesting, because a lot of times when people are trying to make pivots, they have to utilize their free time to be able to get that experience. And that's one thing that we talk about all the time. It's like whether you're moonlighting or whether you're trying to like get up to speed on something else, it's not always necessarily in your 9 to 5 or your day job that you'll get the experience to make the career transition or pivot that you want to. It usually takes doing some legwork or putting in some legwork outside of that time frame, right? So obviously you did that, had the interest and passion and followed that passion to wedding planning, right? We're able to hustle your way into joining like the industry and also working with a top wedding planner in Chicago, which obviously that takes a grit and determination to be able to do that. That discipline comes in there. And then giving that patience, right? One thing that you said that was very interesting is that was the ground floor, the training for you of getting into like the service industry, right? Tell me, I guess, what is one of the biggest things that you think that people have to keep in mind as they transition or as they looked into getting into jobs that you would classify that are in the service industry in particular?
That's a great question. I think at the end of the day with the service industry, right, it's customer service. It's like you're kind of selling yourself. And I think you kind of have to be personable and you kind of also have to know how to sell, which is something that I struggled with in my first rendition as a wedding planner, going at it on my own, right? So I'll give you an example. Like I said, when I was trying to look for clients, when I moved back to New York, I did a lot of bridal shows. So my first bridal show, I was very nervous. I did this beautiful table arrangement and I had this beautiful table and I was like, okay, I hope just like 5 people come up to me and like sign up to meet with me. Like I was just hoping for 5, but I actually got 60 people to sign up and that were interested in my services, which was amazing. But where I failed is that I was so scared to talk to these people, to call them and convert them into clients. Like when you are working for yourself and you're in the service industry, you are the one that has to sell these clients. They're not just gonna drop into your lap and be like, here, take my money. Like you have to convince them to actually book you. And I like to consider myself an introvert, so sales was definitely not my strong suit. And I sat on those leads too long, so much so that when I finally, maybe like a few weeks later, forced myself to get over the fear and just call these people. Some of them were like, hey, like we were waiting for you to call us and we never heard from you. So, we moved on. We went with somebody else. And that was like a huge wake up call because that's money lost, money left on the table that I didn't take advantage of because of fear. So like in the service industry, especially when you're solo, you're the service, they're wanting to work with you, especially if you're the face of the brand. So you have to really be able to put yourself out there, even if it makes you uncomfortable, and don't wait too long.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And that's one thing that you cannot discount. Like any industry or any job that teaches you sales, it's one of the most valuable transferable skills that you can get, because at any level in any job, if you're at a point where you have to start selling business, if you don't practice that or utilize that skill, you lose it, right? So it's like so important to be put into those situations, and it is uncomfortable. It's not the most fun thing to do, but if it's something that you've been able to build up, I've always found that that's such a valuable transferable skill for sure.
Yeah.
So you go in from that standpoint. Obviously you go in and you start your wedding planning business and decide at a certain point, like this is no longer for you. How did you determine, other than suits, how did you determine that becoming an executive assistant was where you wanted to pivot into?
Yeah. So I found that other than suits or television, a lot of the things that an executive assistant does on a day-to-day basis was kind of similar to what I was doing for my bride. So, a lot of executive assistants were doing calendar scheduling on behalf of our executives. Just like, wedding planners, when you have a bride and groom, you have to do like vendor calls, vendor walkthroughs, stuff like that. So you're booking calls between potential vendors and the clients, the venue manager and the client, a lot of check-in calls, and then like towards the month of, you're doing all the like final check calls. So you're coordinating a lot of calls amongst groups of people as a wedding planner. So I was like, okay, here's a clear transferable skill. Like I'm coordinating the calendar for my clients, I coordinate the calendar for the executive. And then of course, another major aspect of being an executive assistant is event planning. EAs have to plan conferences, offsites, team building activities. Your executive is always always traveling, so you're coordinating the travel for your executive. So that was clear. Like the wedding is an event. If I can plan a wedding, which is a one-time special event, of course I could plan a 20-person offsite, a 20-person conference. You know, I know how to work with hotels and venue managers from working on the wedding side, so it's not that much different planning an event in a hotel or a conference, or like finding the dinner reservations for rehearsal dinners. You're finding dinner reservations for business meetings. So it's a lot of the same things, just in a different and, in my opinion, less stressful manner as an EA versus like a wedding.
And it's so interesting that you did that, because a lot of times people struggle with finding the parallels with their transferable skills between job A and job B. What was your process for doing that? Like, how did you notice that, and then how were you able to make those like apples to apples comparisons?
Yeah, it was a lot of research. Like, I decided to join, like, people sleep on Facebook groups, but Facebook groups are popping, and there's a lot of free information. So there's like this Facebook group called State of the Executive Assistant. So I was just lurking in there, like, what kind of questions are these EAs asking, just so I understand, like, what are you guys coming across in your day to day? And can I figure it out just like you're figuring out? Can I do that? And like, people are asking questions, people are giving solutions to their questions. So it's like, okay, starting to just understand, what does this role entail? What are the challenges that people are commonly facing, and what are the solutions to those challenges? And this was even before like ChatGPT and AI, you know? So it's like, you just had to use Google and do research. Quora, you know, people were leaving EA questions on Quora, so I was utilizing that. There was YouTube videos on how to be an executive assistant, like nothing crazy, but I didn't really know much, and I really wanted to be able to position myself well, so I did a lot of studying and research before I like hit my first interview.
Yeah. And those resources, like you said, that people sleep on, I did not even realize about Facebook groups. I'm going to have to check it out for sure, for different things. But yeah, there's so many resources online that you can get a lot of free knowledge and a lot of free information on. And that's super helpful, because you said it right there. And I was going to mention before, this is before the days of ChatGPT, right? Has Power Pivots inspired you to reevaluate your career path? If so, look into Power Pivots Career Coaching. Whether you're interested in career discovery, job description dissection, or interview prep, I take a tailored approach to helping you understand your ultimate career goals and get closer to them. Interested? Fill out the interest form at the bottom of the show notes for your free 30-minute consultation. For any questions, email hatu@powerpivots.co. That's HATU@powerpivots.co. As always, pivot powerfully. So that leads into the next question that I had for you, is translating that to your resume, right? How were you able to do that? Because now you take a job description, you take your resume, you pump it into ChatGPT, and then they can help you with speaking to the key words and phrases that are in a job description. But how were you able to make sure that you doctored your resume to the point where it was tailor-made and fit for an EA?
Yeah, so I think I definitely looked up what an executive assistant resume looks like. In some of those groups, they had templates floating around. And then I talk about this on social media a lot. I finessed my resume, right? I realized that I think when I graduated college, I had applied to a ton of executive assistant roles. And at that time, I don't even think I really knew what an executive assistant was. I just knew like Suits and like Donna. And I was like, yes, I want to be Donna. So I just applied and I got no hits. Like, nobody called me back to be an executive assistant. So luckily, while I was like taking a break from my master's in Chicago, I was working at the university as a business administrator, supporting like a faculty member. And part of my role there was planning conferences and events and like helping the faculty director with his calendar and stuff like that. So though my title was an executive assistant, I basically was an executive assistant. I was doing a lot of the same roles. So I was like, okay, I'm going to change my title on my resume to executive assistant, because if it has business administrator, I'm not going to get any hit. Like none of these recruiters are going to give me a chance. So that's kind of how I like doctored my resume, just by changing the title and making sure my bullet points in like the first line, I make sure I was capturing the 5 key points that an EA does: the calendar, the travel, the expenses, events, and projects. That was clearly laid out in my first like 2-3 bullet points, so that I was able to like at least get past some of these resume checks. and make it onto the next stage. And then I also strategically, like I said, targeted smaller tech startups that people who probably wouldn't look too heavily at the resume, like, or would take somebody with a little bit less experience because they just want a hard worker, someone who's going to wear multiple hats and get stuff done. And so I took a chance on like these no-name startups that, you know, are just raising money and they need someone. And that was how I decided I was going to get my foot in the door, and it worked out.
Perfect. So you found the right fit, right? You were able to take the information that you saw from online and make sure that you tailored what you needed to that position. I always love when people are like, well, I basically was doing this. And they're like, oh, should I make that my title? I'm like, yeah, you might as well, right? Like you might as well, because if you're doing what the job entails and you can speak to it, I'm not saying like go from telling them that you're the VP
right. So let's
tell them that you know, let's not inflate like that. But if it's like it's one-to-one, if it's linear, then you might as well say it, because if that's the blocker for you getting your foot into the door, you can get past that by just making small changes and that small alteration. I think there's one thing that you said before also that's super important, right? You said that you sold your skill set to individuals who may not necessarily know exactly what they're looking for. Yes. I want you to talk a little bit more through that process, because, you know, you have founders who are maybe first-time founders or inexperienced founders. They just know that they need an EA and they need somebody to help them out, but they may not know exactly what they're looking for, which is sometimes the benefit of applying for roles at a startup. How are you able to go about selling your experience to the point where you're like, hey, I'm fit for what you need, or this is exactly what you need, and guiding them so that you're on the path to success?
I think what really helped me stand out is that I took a proactive approach versus like a reactive approach. So like I said, I had never been an EA before, and I was targeting a company where they had never had an EA before as well. So I was like, y'all probably don't know what you need. So if when I get into the interview, I have to approach it as if I'm the expert telling you guys what you need, even though, you know, I'm getting everything from Facebook and Reddit, like, but I'm going to package it in a way that it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, so that you feel confident that when you bring me in, I'm going to set you up for success. And that was kind of what all the research was saying as well. Like, it's like you have to be proactive. You can't wait for these people to say, oh, I have a conflict on my calendar, can you resolve it? It's more like I'm saying, hey, you have a conflict on your calendar, I'm going to move this and do this and do this so that all this is going to be resolved, and you don't even have to think about anything. And that's what people want to see. So it's really about being proactive and coming with a plan and like presenting it with confidence. It's faking it until you make it. That's what I tell people. You're faking it until you make it. And you know, it's going to get easier each time. And then once you do it one time, you know you could do it again. But
yeah, absolutely. And that's really what it boils down to, like telling them what they need. And across the board, I don't care what role you're applying for, 9.9 times out of 10, this absolutely works. Because if you've done your research and you've talked to people and you figured out this is what they need in this role, past what's on the job description, right? Like really get into intricate details of what they need for the job, and being able to present yourself as that and saying, hey, I know that you have this job because you have this problem and you need to resolve it. I can resolve that problem for you. You're way ahead of other candidates that are applying for the job, right? Because at this point, like the individual that's hiring can already see how you're alleviating what is clearly a burden for them at this point, right? So it is so important to make sure that you're doing that in job interviews. And it's not just, hey, I'm going to try and like figure out the job, or I want this job because I'm good for it, but being like, I am here to alleviate a burden from you.
Exactly.
And this is why I came in. So, okay, we've talked about the pivot. We've talked about the interest in it. But one of the other aspects that we touched upon a little bit was SixFigureEA, right? So let's talk about, how did you decide from a certain point that, you know, you've gone through being executive assistant, you've worked at different companies at different sizes, and you've decided, hey, I want to take this and I want to coach at this point. Like, how did you do that? How did you go about building that business up?
Yeah, so it was kind of like I fell into it. So I started SixFigure in 2020. So basically, you know, COVID happened and everyone was like stuck at home and TikTok was blowing up, and I'm an avid TikToker. Like I watch too much TikTok, and I was like, okay, you know, by 2023, I remember because it was January 23, I made a New Year's resolution. I'm like, okay, let me not just try to be a consumer of TikTok. Let me actually produce something and see if I can so my main goal was to sell a product, and I was like, if I want to sell a product, I need an audience to sell a product to. So let me use 2023 to try to build an audience, and whatever they're interested in, I can potentially sell them a product. So I was doing a bunch of stuff, but the things that was hitting a lot was my executive assistant tips, and I was just giving tips and tricks, like, here are the 5 skills you need to be an executive assistant, and people would like that. And then I was like, okay, let me keep going with this EA stuff. And I started to share, I talked about how I was making like $160K as an executive assistant. People love that. People love
the dollar signs. The dollar signs.
They love that one. So I was like, okay, so you guys like money. All right, I get it. So I was like, okay. Then I started a series where I would share job of the day. My channel has pivoted, but I was doing job of the day where I was sharing one work from home executive assistant job that paid over 6 figures every day with my audience. And that's really what kind of blew me up. So my goal in 2023 was to get to 10,000 followers. And I told myself, if I got to 10,000, then okay, that's an audience to sell something to. But by the end of the year, I was at 40,000 on TikTok. So I was like, okay, we really have an audience. So then in 2024, I was like, now it's time to sell. It's time to monetize. I have this audience. And at that time, everybody was doing courses. So I was like, I got to do a course. That's when I built out Executive Assistance 101, my signature course, where I really go into depth about how to be an executive assistant and all the skill set that we need, the relationship building, and also the career development portion. So I taught that live in April 2024. I had about 5 students, and then I now sell the on-demand courses. And in the meantime, I was still doing my videos on TikTok, on Instagram, and I started to expand to other platforms. And then, it kind of evolved. I was doing executive assistant, but I was noticing people were more interested in the job search aspect. So I was talking about, this is how I land in my role, and this is why I target startups, and this is why, you have to finesse your resume. And so I added on coaching calls onto my services. And then I started to do interview Q&A. I would an AI voice would ask me an interview question, and I delivered the answer on video. And one of the most popular ones was my salary transparency, where it's the recruiter asked me, actually this was a real interview where the recruiter asked me, what's your salary expectation? And I pushed it back, and I was like, what's the range? I pushed it back to the recruiter. And so people really liked that. And so to this day, I still interview Q&A videos are one of my anchor content on SixFigureEA. But all my interview questions and answers, they do have an executive assistant slant, but of course anyone's able to adapt them for whatever role that you're going for.
No, that's amazing. I mean, the power of social media, right? And it's obviously before, to be able to get into the role, you were consuming the content, right? And lurking on the page, like you said, and all of that. And then all of a sudden you're able to take that and build up a skill set, become a subject matter expert. And now you're able to produce content on that yourself, which is amazing, honestly. So what do you think is the biggest thing for somebody who would want to build up that kind of following, right? Or be able to build or provide a service that is actually consumed by individuals? What would you say is the biggest piece of advice that you would give them?
It's really about listening to the audience, right? And knowing that things change and being able to pivot quickly. So what I was doing in 2023 with SixFigureEA is much different to what I'm doing today in 2026. Like I said, I started with courses, but if you're on TikTok, you may know that people have an aversion to courses. Everyone is selling something, and now people are very sensitive to being sold things. So it's, the course might not necessarily be the best route to go. Not to say don't make a course, but just you have to understand your audience and the sensitivities. And with COVID happening and everyone going remote, and now people just starting to go back to office, we hear everybody's lonely, everybody is feeling disconnected. What I'm now seeing is that people really want community. People want a chance to talk to other people, like-minded people, and share their experiences with others versus just being given tons of information to consume. So that's where I've done another pivot within SixFigureEA, where instead of just doing a course, I recently just launched a community for executive assistants called SFIA Labs, where we meet weekly, and we're doing AI tools, we're doing mentorship, hot seats, and it's really just a space for very motivated EAs who want to make 6 figures can come together and learn from each other and myself in like a private space. And I just started that, so this is like week 3, but it's really nice to talk to people, talk to like people who have been following me for like 3+ years, and now I can talk to them one-on-one, face-to-face, and really understand their needs and actually meet their needs, you know. So it's very nice. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, obviously, you've been able to successfully pivot a couple times now and just be able to excel from there. What would you say is advice that you would give yourself if you're looking back, if you had to give yourself advice before you made the pivot? What is some advice that you would give yourself? And then also, in that same vein, what is some advice that you stick to or abide by right now?
Advice I would give myself is probably just to be easy on myself. Like, don't beat myself up. Like, you know, even to this day with the launch of my community, it's like you want the results right now, right? Like if 100 people could join my community, that would be amazing. I would love that, but that's not realistic, right? Everything, you're going to start small. And just because you're starting small, you're starting maybe with 1 or 2 clients, you're starting with like 1 or 2 people buying your service or product, that doesn't mean that no one is going to buy it in future. Take it as the opportunity to like refine, you know, like I'm saying, my first round is a beta to like test and make sure things are perfect before going to a wider scale, because things will go wrong when you need the opportunity to test things and refine things and make it stronger, make it better. So my advice is that patience, be patient, be kind with yourself, and then like stay consistent as well. I think that's the thing that I see the most where people are failing is like, you know, they give up maybe a little bit too easily, and it's like, no, this takes years of work to see any results. So what I like to tell myself when I'm like feeling, you know, discouraged is like, this is the part when I like look back and I write my memoir, this is gonna be like this is when she was, you know, heads down grinding, and then next year is when it took off. So this is what I'm telling myself. So just be patient. It's going to take time. Nothing good comes easy, you know, so that would be my advice to myself that I'm still telling myself right now. But to be fair, now we have so many tools with AI, like the things that I was doing in 2024, I think ChatGPT just came out, and it was such a huge help to build my course, but it's nowhere near the level it is now. And like things that would have taken me weeks in 2024 are taking me 1 hour with AI. So it's just really trying to stay abreast of all these tools that are coming out, because they're really helpful, and it's really allowing more, I think, solo entrepreneurs to thrive alone, because, you know, the power of AI, it's awesome.
Awesome. Funmi, you've given us so much wonderful information here, so many different nuggets that I think the cool thing also are very transferable across different jobs, right? Different jobs, different industries, different functions for sure. Even past being executive assistant as well. Like, you know, for people who, like you said, are looking to be solo entrepreneurs, anybody who is interested in the service industry, just really great advice. But do you have any parting words of wisdom for us?
Parting words of wisdom. If you really want to make some serious change in your life, a 9-to-5 may not be the way to do it, right? Like you have to put in time and hustle and energy outside of your 9-to-5, which can be daunting, right? If people have lives, you may have kids, families, and it might be hard to like carve out additional time to do that like extra work for yourself. But if you can just be a little bit disciplined and a little bit consistent with yourself, and just give yourself 1 or 2 hours with AI, is a lot of time these days. So, you know, take a chance on yourself. As someone who like, you know, works close with the executives, and I see all the decisions that they're making, like it's not necessarily so favorable to an employee. We see all these layoffs happening all the time. Like there's nothing you can really control with companies doing layoffs. But if you have something for yourself, you know, no one can really take that away. And yes, it might be a lot more work and time front, but I think that will pay off in the end. So always bet on yourself is my bet on yourself.
Always bet on yourself. Amazing. Funmi, thank you so much for taking the time here to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Hatu. It was a pleasure.
Of course. And thank you all so much for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe for more. Most importantly, pivot powerfully. Be well, everyone.